Hey friends, welcome back to the next video, and this time we're gonna dive deeper into the difference between all and all selected. I've used this formula already in the first Power BI course, but I did not really dive too deep into the difference between all and all selected. And because this is a often asked question, also in Power BI interviews for instance, let's figure out what the actually main difference is. So let's click on the plus symbol here, and then let's actually evaluate this within a new table. So let me just use maybe from the orders table. There's a good example for that. I could use my categories. So let me tick on the categories here, and then let's actually take a look at the total sales, like that. You could use any other kind of measure if you want as well, but let me stick to this one here. Then I go to the formatting options, and let me just increase the values for now so we can see that better on our screens. So it's easier to follow along, I hope, with the 15 size. So we can see that we have a breakdown of the total sales for each of the categories we have in here. And this is totally fine. But sometimes we are also interested maybe in the percentage of total, right? And there are quick ways to do it, simply by clicking on this down arrow for total sales, and then I could say I actually like to show the values as, and then percent of grand total. This is the quick tip, right? So click on this, and you would see here the percentage numbers. So this works exactly as it should, simply by doing this. But now let's now explore the same using the all function. So let me actually go in here and say for now I would like to actually go show values as, and I will say no calculation to see the original values back. The other way using DAX to actually evaluate the percentage numbers would be that we divide each of those individual values by the total amount, right? So to do this, we first need to evaluate this total amount for each of the rows, meaning we need to remove the filter context for cheese, and then we divide the total sales in here for the category by the total sales in total, by this 1.35 million. Now to do this, to modify the filter context, we already learned that we can use the calculate function for that. Meaning, I could right click on the measures table here, click on new measure, and then let's evaluate this. Let's say these are all total sales, like that, is equal to, shift enter, new line. And then I say this all total sales is calculate, because we want to modify the filter context. Then what is the expression? In our case, it is the total sales, which we choose as a metric, even though we could also use different ones, but let's actually stick to total sales for now. And then as the filter, we want to use here the all function. So all, and what does the all function actually do? Let's see. It returns all the rows in a table or all the values in a column, ignoring any filters that might have been applied. So that's the main point. We're ignoring any filters. And what kind of filter is applied here? Well, it is the category, right? So for drinks, the total sales are filtered to drinks, and that is why we see 288,000 and so on, instead of the 1.35 million in this row. So if we say we calculate the total sales, but ignore, in this case, our category filter, we could be specific here and say we want to ignore the category from the orders table. So this means, in this case, we're ignoring if there's a filter on category and calculate the total sales without this filter. So if I evaluate that, and let's actually maybe format this here. Let's go with the dollar symbol here. And for the decimal numbers, let's say 2. Just make sure that this is also in place. And then let me select this one here, click on all total sales, and let's see, and we see that we get exactly here the total amount, because we ignored the specific context here, the filter context. So that's how the all function works. So far so good. And now we can calculate here the percentage numbers. So we could simply say, in this case, let's say a new measure, right click on the measures table, new measure, and let's practice this here. Let's say these are percentage of total, and that is equal to, and I go to new line and say this is simply, I'm using the divide function, best practice, to avoid any kind of division by zero errors. And we say we want to divide, in this case, our total sales measure, so total sales, and we divide it by, in this case, the all total sales, right? This one here. You can close this here, and then we can press enter. Make sure that this is percentage as a format here. All right, here we go. And now if we put this inside, percentage of total, tick this option, and we would see here the percentage numbers. And just to evaluate whether this is true, of course, we can do our trick one more time. Go total sales, show values as, use percent of total here, and we would see exactly the same numbers in here as well as in here, right? So this works exactly as we would expect it. So let me just go back in here and let's go back to show values as and no calculation. Because now let's see what happens if we slice and dice our table. So that means if I now choose, for instance, a slicer here, it could also be another visual, which we use as a filter, but let's say we use a slicer here. And now I select here my category from the orders table. Now I got here my slicer. I can, of course, format this if I go to the formatting pane and say a specific, for instance, for the values, let's make them maybe a little bit, let's make them bold so we can see them better and increase the size to, let's say, 14 here. I think that's fine. Okay, so we got our slicer. If you want, feel free to go here, choose a drop down instead, or use here the formatting pane to adjust the slicer further. But for now, let's just say I'd like to now select something from here. So let's say I'm selecting, for instance, cheese, and I hold my control key and select also condiments here, cookies, and let's say drinks, just as an example. Now, what actually happens here? You see that our total sales numbers, of course, now in total is less because we only selected specific categories here. This, of course, is expected. However, the all total sales is completely ignoring any filters based on the category. Because in our formula here, we said that we want to remove any filters here which come from, in this case, the column category. And this means, or this referring to, any filters in the visual itself, so in our table, but also any kind of category filters which are coming from external visuals. For instance, the slicer here. Or if it would be a bar chart where we select categories, then also that would have the same effect on our table. So the all function is completely ignoring this filter. This is why our percentage numbers here, they are correct by dividing this by this value, but in total we do not add up to 100% anymore, simply because we have selected only a subset of our categories. Now what if we would like to have here the 100%? So we'd like to know, okay, now based on our selection here, what is actually those 251,000 based on the 755,000 instead of the 1.3 million? How can we achieve that? And this is exactly where the ALLSELECTED function comes into play. So let me just use our all total sales here, and let's just select everything, Control C to copy it. You can also, for practice purposes, of course, rewrite the formula and then using ALLSELECTED. But in my case, just to save some time, Control C to copy this here, and then I right click on the measures table, click on new measure, and I will paste this inside. And now I'm simply say calculate this value, but this time not with the all function, but the ALLSELECTED function. Here we go. And if you read through the description for the ALLSELECTED, then you will read that it ignores the filters inside the current visual, but it takes into account actually the filters from external visuals. That means the filter here for cheese and so on will be ignored, but the filter from the selection here is included. So let's actually, let me show you this. Let's say ALLSELECTED total sales, selected. Okay, let me press enter to evaluate that. And then for now, let's just remove the slicer. So we have our here default values again. And now let's see. Let me increase here the size and let me select ALLSELECTED here. Take this option and you see it gives us exactly the same result as the all function. Because currently, of course, we only have the specific filter inside the visual, meaning for each row we have the filter category. And this is why here we're ignoring this filter with the all function as well as with the ALLSELECT function, and we get the total value for the whole data set. But now, as soon as we use an external filter, for instance from a slicer or any other kind of visual, and select here, for instance, let's say cheese, and also condiments and drinks and fruits and fish, now you see that the behavior is different, because the ALLSELECTED function here has now a different value, which is simply the aggregated value for the selection. As you can see here, this value is exactly the same as this value here, where the ALL function, on the other hand, is completely ignoring the selection coming from the slicer. And this is why, if we would now calculate our percentage numbers based on the ALLSELECTED, we would get exactly the 100% and not the 66.3%. And of course I can show you this. If I go percent of total, that was our measure. So if I select this here, Control-C to copy it, and I simply will replace the all total sales with ALLSELECTED total sales. That's all I do. So let me right click here, new measure. Let's say percent of total, and let's call this 2. And now let's say ALLSELECTED total sales. So just maybe remove it completely, it's easier, and search for ALLSELECTED total sales. Here we go, this one. Now let's press enter. And now let's also put this, just for the sake of this example, in here. Select this option, and of course we would like to format this correctly. So let's also select this one here and say we'd like to see this as a percentage symbol here as well. And now we see there's a difference between the percentage numbers here and here, because this is only based on the 897,000 and so on, and down there we got the 100%. And that's basically the main difference between all and ALLSELECTED. So if you're asked, or if from a colleague or during an interview, always keep in mind that the difference is that the all function, let's say here with the all function, can ignore all the filters based on either a column, we only selected a column here, or if you would give the all function the complete orders table, so without the column category, it would ignore any filters based or applied on the orders table. And on the other hand, the ALLSELECTED function here, this also ignores any filters, in this case from the category, because that's the column we selected, but only in the specific visual itself. So if there's a column or a bar chart, for instance, if there is the category itself inside the visual, then this selection will be ignored. But any other kind of filter coming from external, so from outside, like for instance from a slicer or from any other kind of visual we have when we select something, this is taken into account with the ALLSELECTED function. And that is the difference. And this of course then allows for different kinds of insights, right? As you can see here, for instance, for the percentage numbers, this is just one example, but there are various examples which you can use when it comes to all and ALLSELECTED and when to use which one. But you've also seen that it can give you the same results. As an example, if I remove the filter here, we get exactly the same results, right? For all and ALLSELECTED. So it really depends. And sometimes you can get the same results, but you can also get different results, as you have seen. And now, of course, it's up to you at first to understand, of course, the difference, and then to apply the correct one of those two whenever you have to use any kind of this to get some insights. So that's it for this video. Hopefully you understood what we did here. If you got questions, then feel free to ask. Otherwise, thanks a lot for watching, and I can't wait to see you where? In the next video. Until then, best guys.